They said it so softly, as if that would soften the weight of it. We just think, maybe it's better if Grandma doesn't come around too much anymore. I stood in the kitchen doorway, hands still slightly wet from washing the dishes. The sound of cartoons played in the living room. One of the kids had just called out, "Grandma, look!" But the words from my son-in-law hovered in the air, heavier than any silence I'd ever sat through. I nodded. I didn't argue, didn't ask who "we" was. I just reached for the towel, dried my hands, and picked up the banana bread I had made still warm, wrapped in a soft cloth with a card tucked beneath the string. "I'll head out early," I said. "Dinner was lovely." They didn't stop me. That part hurt more than his words. On the way home, I didn't cry. I didn't even turn on the radio. I just drove in silence until I saw the sign for the bank. It was closed, but the lights in the lobby glowed. I looked through the glass at the familiar desk where I used to make deposits every birthday, $100 for each grandchild, folded into their education fund. Little acts of love they didn't even know I'd been doing. I sat there in the parking lot for a long while. Then I reached into my bag and took out a scrap of paper. On it, I wrote only this: "Love is not a bank account, and I've stopped making deposits where I no longer live." When I got home, I unwrapped the banana bread, sliced off one piece for myself, and put the rest into the freezer. No one called to ask why I left. And that night, for the first time in a long while, I slept through till morning. No waiting for the next visit. No hoping the phone might ring. Just stillness. The mornings used to have rhythm, not urgency, just a kind of quiet grace. I'd be up before the sun, letting the coffee percolate while folding tiny socks, rinsing out lunch containers, and scribbling little notes for their backpacks. "You've got this, love. Don't forget your smile. Bar's proud of you." No one asked me to do these things, but that's how love works, isn't it? It fills the gaps no one notices until they're left empty. That house wasn't mine, but I made space for myself quietly. A folded blanket on the arm of the kitchen chair, a photo of my late husband on the fridge, tucked behind the kids' magnets. It wasn't much, just a corner of comfort in a life I no longer led, but still gave to. I knew they were busy, my daughter working full-time again. My son-in-law stressed and quiet most evenings. I never tried to insert myself. I stayed out of arguments, gave them the evenings, stayed upstairs after dinner. I used to tell myself I was being helpful. That one day, they'd say, "We couldn't have done this without you, Mum." But that day never came. Then little things began to shift. The blanket disappeared. My chair was replaced with a stack of deliveries. No one asked if I wanted tea anymore. One afternoon, I came downstairs and found a box of my old scarves and books set near the door, labelled "donation." They must have assumed I was done with them. Maybe I had been. Maybe I was just part of the background now, like the light switch, the grocery list, the dog leash on the wall, still there, just not seen. He never raised his voice. That's what I used to tell people, like it was a good thing. No, Andrew's respectful, quiet. He doesn't shout. But there are silences that are sharper than noise, moments where someone doesn't need to say a word for you to feel unwelcome. It was small at first. A glance toward his watch when I stayed longer than he expected, the subtle shift in his jaw when the kids ran to me instead of to their parents, a sigh that sounded like it was meant for something else, but always came after my stories. I brushed it off, told myself maybe I was overthinking. After all, he wasn't rude. He always said thank you, always smiled in front of guests. But some smiles are just stretched skin over resentment. One evening, I reached for the old linen placemat I'd embroidered years ago. It had always sat beneath the fruit bowl. My fingers touched the corner, and I noticed it was folded, half hanging off the table. When I adjusted it, I caught his eyes. He looked at me, flat, polite, unblinking, like he was waiting for me to put it back the way it was. I did. I smiled too, but mine wasn't polite. It was the kind you give when you realise someone's already decided the room isn't yours anymore. Later that night, as I put the dishes in the sink, I heard him whisper to my daughter in the next room, "She's here. A lot." And she didn't reply. That was the worst part. I dried my hands slowly and stood at the window, watching the porch light flicker. That porch had my old rocking chair on it, the one my husband built the year he passed. They'd painted it grey, said it matched the siding. I didn't mind the colour. What stayed with me was that no one asked. It was Maddie's 8th birthday. I baked the banana bread with extra walnuts, just the way she likes it. Wrapped her present in soft yellow paper, the same colour as the bows I used to tie in her hair when she was little. I even found the card she made me 2 years ago, with the crooked hearts and the stick figure that said, "Me pluck grandma, Lee happy." I tucked it inside the gift box, under the ribbon. They hadn't formally invited me, but I heard them mention it over dinner the week before. I thought maybe it was just an oversight, or maybe they were planning a surprise. So I showed up, not too early, not empty-handed, not in the way. When I stepped inside, no one turned. The kids were chasing each other around the living room, frosting on their cheeks. My daughter gave a small smile like, someone seeing an old neighbour at the grocery store. Andrew didn't say anything. He just reached for another plate. I placed the bread on the counter, quietly, set the gift next to the others, though none of them had my name. For an hour, I stayed, handed out napkins, picked up a dropped cup, clapped when the candles were blown out. No one stopped me, but no one included me either. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't say. When the kids started tearing into the presents, I waited. Gift after gift was opened. Maddie's face lit up with each one. Then she picked up the box with yellow ribbon, looked at it, tilted her head, then turned to her mom and asked, "Who's this one from?" My daughter glanced at me, then reached out and moved it to the side. "That one's for later," she said quickly. Later never came. So I stood, adjusted the sleeves of my cardigan, and walked toward the door. I paused for a second, just long enough to look at Maddie's smile as she hugged someone else. Then I left. They didn't notice. Or maybe they did, and chose not to follow. The next morning, I didn't cry. I made tea, folded laundry, wiped the counter twice, even though it was already clean. Then I took out the envelope. It was cream-coloured, thick marked with the bank's name. Inside were the documents I'd kept updated every year since Maddie was born. The education fund. I'd opened it quietly, without telling anyone. It wasn't large, just something to help them start. Each birthday, I'd added a little more. Not for thanks, not for recognition, just so they'd know that when they needed help, someone had thought ahead. But yesterday proved something else. I was no longer part of their future, and that's okay. People grow, move on, choose different closeness, but so can I. I changed into my soft blue blouse, the one Maddie once said made me look like the sky. I folded my coat, placed the envelope in my bag, and walked to the bank. No drama, no notes, no tears. The woman at the counter greeted me kindly. She remembered me from last time, smiled as she pulled up the account. "I'd like to close this one," I said gently. She blinked, then nodded. "Any reason, Ma'am?" I smiled softly. "Just realigning priorities." I signed the papers, listened to the printer hum, watched as she slid a check across the table, my handwriting now mirrored by the teller's. As I stepped outside, the wind brushed past my cheeks. A leaf floated down from somewhere, landing at my feet. I didn't step on it. I walked around it. because even small things deserve to be left undisturbed when possible. I kept my phone near that night, not because I expected anything dramatic, just maybe a text. Maybe my daughter would notice. Maybe she'd ask, "Hey, did you change something with Maddie's account?" Or even just say, "Thanks for coming yesterday." But nothing came. I checked the screen once before bed. No missed calls, no new messages, only a weather alert about light rain tomorrow. I placed the phone face down. The next morning, the silence stretched. I watered my garden like usual. Pulled a few weeds near the rosemary. Watched a hummingbird pause at the feeder I hung last spring with Maddie. She'd named him Sparkle, said he looked like a jewel when the sun hit just right. I smiled at the memory, but it didn't sting. Not anymore. I went back inside, made toast, and opened my planner. The week ahead was blank. There used to be ballet recitals, school plays, Sunday brunch. Now, just white space. I didn't try to fill it, didn't call anyone, didn't drop hints or leave breadcrumbs. Because the truth is, if they didn't notice something missing today, they wouldn't appreciate it if I pointed it out tomorrow. That afternoon, I sat by the window and ran my thumb along the edge of my old wedding ring. I still wore it, though not out of mourning, just habit, a reminder of what enduring looked like. The phone buzzed once. Spam. "You're eligible for a loan." I laughed. For the first time in days, I actually laughed, because they may have forgotten I exist in their plans, but I remembered something more important. I'm still whole, even when I'm not included. I didn't close the account to punish anyone. I closed it because I realized something vital. Love, when unacknowledged for too long, needs a place to rest. That place doesn't have to be bitterness. It can be purpose. So I took out a different folder, one I hadn't touched in years. It held a few photos, letters, and a scholarship application I once drafted for girls from my old neighbourhood. Back then, I shelved the idea. Life got busy, but now the quiet had space for it again. I pulled out a blank sheet of thick paper, took my time with the pen, wrote slowly, clearly, like I used to when helping Maddie with her spelling. "Dear future girl," I began, "this isn't from a foundation. It's from a woman who once dreamed of being seen." I didn't make it long. Just a letter to a girl I hadn't met yet. Someone who might need help, not because she was related to me, but because someone believed she was worthy. I folded the paper with care, slipped in a photo Maddie as a toddler on my lap, both of us covered in paint from a failed art project, not out of regret, just to remember where love once lived. Then I sealed it with the old red wax stamp I found in Charles's drawer, the one we used for Christmas cards back when handwritten things still mattered. I called the community college that afternoon, asked how to set up a small private fund, quietly, nothing big, just enough to cover someone's books. They said yes. Later, I placed the envelope inside the drawer where I keep my recipes and garden clippings, not hidden, just waiting for the right day or the right girl. Because some things don't need to be given to the loudest ones. Sometimes they're meant for the ones still learning how to speak up. And in that moment, I wasn't mourning what I'd lost anymore. I was planting something I'd never outgrow. It was nearly 4 p.m. when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, no packages, no appointments. I opened the door slowly, just enough to see through the crack, and there she was. My granddaughter, Maddie, holding a small woven basket in both hands, standing with one foot turned inward the way she used to when she was nervous. "Hi, Grandma," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Mum said I could drop this off." Inside the basket were some apples, a small jar of jam, and a folded card. No envelope. I stepped aside. "Would you like to come in for a moment?" I asked, not sure if I should. She looked behind her. No car idling at the curb, no one watching. "Just for a minute," she said. She slipped off her shoes' little ballet flats with a scuff on the side and placed them beside the door, side by side. Neat, polite. I led her to the kitchen, the way I used to when she was little. She didn't sit, just looked around quietly, eyes tracing the outlines of things she remembered, the hummingbird feeder outside, the apron hanging by the pantry door. "I helped pick the apples," she said. "They're from the new market by our school." I nodded. "They look lovely." She paused, then handed me the folded card. It was simple, plain cream with faint lines across it, like notebook paper dressed up. Inside, a single sentence in her handwriting. I didn't agree with what Dad said. No flourish, no justification, just that. She looked up, uncertain. "Is it okay that I came?" I walked over and gently touched her cheek. "You're always welcome, sweetheart." And just like that, the silence cracked, not shattered, but softened. She smiled for the first time, small, honest. Then she glanced at the clock. "I should go." I walked her to the door. She slipped her shoes back on, the same way she had taken them off, side by side, still neat. At the threshold, she turned back. "I still remember how you made hot cocoa with cinnamon. I told my friend about it. She wants to try it sometime." I smiled. "Tell her she's welcome too." Maddie didn't say anything that night at dinner, not directly, but she didn't have to. Her silence said enough. They were all seated, my daughter, her husband, the boys fidgeting with their forks. The table was set like usual, except tonight. The energy was different. Maddie picked at her salad, then gently stirred her water with a spoon, though there was nothing in it. My daughter finally asked, "How was school today?" Maddie shrugged. "Fine." Then paused. I visited Grandma. The spoon stopped. The son-in-law looked up from his plate. My daughter blinked. "You did?" "Yeah," Maddie said, her voice calm. She made space for me. No blame, no raised voices, just truth. The son-in-law shifted in his chair, set his fork down. That wasn't the plan. Maddie didn't respond to him. She just turned to her mum. "She said I'm always welcome, that's all." The silence stretched, like a thin thread across the table tight, but unbroken. One of the boys dropped a napkin. The younger one bent down to pick it up. The tension eased slightly. Then, without looking up, Maddie added, "She remembered my hummingbird. She still has the feeder." My daughter closed her eyes for a moment, long enough for it to mean something. Then opened them again, gentler this time. Did she say anything else? Maddie shook her head. "No, but I left her something." That was it. She didn't explain the card. She didn't ask for permission. She just spoke like someone who had made her own choice. The son-in-law stood to clear the plates. No one stopped him, and as Maddie folded her napkin neatly beside her dish, my daughter reached out and touched her hand. Just for a second, it was small, but it was something. The mail came later than usual that day, mostly catalogues and one electricity bill, but tucked between them was something different. A small, square envelope, no return address, no postage stamp, just my name. In Maddie's handwriting, I brought it inside, placed it gently on the kitchen table like something fragile. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock, and I sat there for a long while before opening it. Inside was a folded piece of soft yellow paper, and wrapped within that, a familiar fabric. It was the handkerchief I'd given Maddie when she was 5. The one with the little M embroidered in the corner. She used to keep it in her coat pocket, just in case. And on the paper, in that same careful script, we remembered the cinnamon. "I made cocoa today. Mum sat with me." That was all. No apology, no explanation. But something opened inside me, something I hadn't dared hope for. I set the handkerchief down beside my tea and went to the drawer where I kept the old tin box, the one with the photos and pressed flowers from years past. I hadn't opened it since they said I needed space. Inside, tucked beside an old-school photo of Maddie in her rain boots, was my own mother's recipe for cocoa with cinnamon, faded, stained, but still readable. I held it for a long time. Then, almost without thinking, I took out a clean card and began to write. You are the warmth I never knew would return. I folded it, placed it into a new envelope, and tucked the handkerchief back in, along with the recipe. No address. I would hand it to her myself when the time was right. But for the first time in a long time, I knew that day might come. I wasn't expecting him. Not that morning. I was trimming the edges of my front hedge, trying to tame the overgrowth near the gate, the old wooden one with the rusted latch, the one that creaked even in soft wind. That's when I heard the crunch of tyres on gravel, a grey sedan I knew well. He stepped out, phone still in hand, like always. But something in his walk was different, less sure, less guarded. He didn't come inside, just stood at the gate, hands in his coat pockets. I didn't say anything, neither did he. For a long second, it was just the wind brushing past us, the clink of my clippers, the scent of jasmine drifting from the side fence. Finally, he nodded once, almost a bow, almost nothing. I picked up Maddie from school yesterday, he said. She was quiet, but good quiet. I raised an eyebrow slightly, still didn't speak. She said you have a hummingbird feeder. He glanced at the bushes. Didn't know those were her favourite. Still, I waited. He looked down, then back at me, and for just a moment, his voice lost its edge. She's been writing in her journal again, said something about cinnamon cocoa and feeling warm in the right places. He paused. I don't know what that means exactly. It means she remembers love, I said softly. He blinked, and for the first time since the day he called me a distraction, his eyes didn't harden. Instead, they searched mine, like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see something he hadn't before. I'll tell my wife you're free this weekend, he said finally, then added, if you want to come by. I nodded. Not yes, not no, just understanding. As he turned to go, he caught sight of the small cloth folded neatly on my porch table, the same handkerchief with the M. He didn't say anything, but he looked at it for a beat longer than he needed to. That was enough. Sometimes we don't need an apology, just a shift in someone's eyes to know the wall is cracking. I didn't plan to stay long, just drop off the card and maybe leave a new jar of cinnamon mix Maddie liked. But when the door opened, it wasn't her mother. It was Maddie herself, barefoot, holding a crayon-streaked napkin. Her hair was in gentle tangles, and her eyes widened like she hadn't expected me to come at all, but had secretly hoped. Hi, she whispered. Hi, sweet pea. I knelt down, holding out the little jar. She took it with both hands, like something precious. You want to come in? She asked. She didn't look at anyone else, just me. Inside the house was quieter than usual. No cartoons, no clatter of chores. Just a pot on the stove, the faint smell of cocoa and cinnamon in the air. Her mother nodded at me from the kitchen, but it was Maddie who guided the moment. She pointed at the table 2 cups, steam still curling from them. I made yours the way you like, less sweet, she said. I smiled, heart swelling. We sat down, side by side, and for the first time in what felt like forever, we didn't have to talk. She placed her drawing beside my cup. It was half finished. A woman and a little girl sitting on a bench. The woman had a purple scarf. The girl held a mug. No faces yet, just shape, just closeness. Then Maddie looked up at me, straight on, no blinking. no flinching, just that wide-eyed, honest gaze only a child can offer. And in that moment, she said everything. That she knew, that she remembered, that she forgave me for not being there because she saw I'd tried, because she saw I was here now. I didn't speak. I just reached across and gently touched her hand. She gripped back, then smiled. It wasn't big, but it was hers, and it was real. After Maddie went to her room, I sat a moment longer. Just me and the quiet, the kind that fills every corner when no one's pretending anymore. I looked over at the side table, a small frame, a photo I hadn't seen in years. It was of me, holding my daughter Maddie's mom at her graduation. We were laughing. Genuine, open-mouthed joy. And then I remembered what came after that day. The silence, the distance, and the things I never explained. I got up, walked slowly to the kitchen where my daughter stood rinsing cups. She didn't turn, but I spoke anyway. There's something I should have said a long time ago. She paused. Water kept running. I know you think I walked away after Dad died, that I got cold. But the truth is, I was drowning. She still didn't speak, but I saw her shoulders shift. I didn't know how to ask for help, and when you stopped calling, I thought maybe I deserved that. The faucet turned off. She turned slightly, still holding the cup. I gave up things I never told you about, I said. Small things, big ones, even the chance to move away and start over. For me? She asked, barely above a whisper. For you, for Maddie, for all of it. I just didn't know how to say that without sounding like I was asking for something back. I pulled a folded slip of paper from my pocket, the original note I wrote for the bank, back when I first set up the fund. It had her name, Maddie's, and the line I'd written at the bottom, because love is what we build quietly, layer by layer. I never wanted recognition, I said. I just wanted to keep showing up, even when no one saw. She looked at the paper, eyes welling just barely, and then she set the cup down, wiped her hands, and stepped forward. She didn't hug me, didn't cry, but she said, I didn't know you were still keeping it. And I answered, I never stopped. The cocoa cups sat empty. The silence was softer now, no tension clinging to the walls, just stillness. I stood in the doorway of Maddie's room for a moment. She was drawing again, but this time there were two faces on the bench. She didn't notice me, or maybe she did, and chose not to break the moment. Downstairs, my daughter was folding towels in the laundry room, not waiting at the door, not asking me to stay, but not stopping me from leaving either. And somehow, that was enough. I stepped into the hallway, pausing by the small side table near the coat rack. There, I placed a tiny folded note under the cinnamon jar. It simply said, keep the warmth going, for her. Next to it, I tucked in the final envelope, the one I'd quietly updated at the bank after my decision. Not the cancellation, but the redirection. Maddie's name was still on it, just under a different account now, with a clause. She would access it when she turned 18 by herself. No strings, no announcements, just love, written in advance. I slipped on my coat. Outside, the late sun threw long golden shadows on the lawn. Leaves danced across the porch like they knew the story had shifted. As I reached the door, I paused, not waiting, not hoping, just feeling. A moment passed. No one came to walk me out, but no one blocked the path either. And that was the quiet victory. I stepped outside. The door gently clicked behind me, and I walked away, lighter than I had in years. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, the one with the scratch from that Thanksgiving years ago. I ran my fingers across it slowly, as if tracing time. The light came in soft, curling around the empty sugar jar, and I let myself drift. It was Maddie's 3rd birthday. Her parents had been caught up in planning the big party, balloons, caterers, a theme that had nothing to do with Maddie. I remember coming early, because I always did. She was still in her pyjamas, sitting on the floor, hair tousled, drawing with stubby crayons. She looked up, wide-eyed, and said, "Grandma, draw with me." So I did. I sat on the kitchen tile, knees aching, and we made a mess of colour. While they arranged hors d'oeuvres, we drew crooked houses, uneven hearts, and stick figures holding hands. Then she handed me a new sheet and whispered, "Draw us happy." And for the first time in a long while, I didn't hesitate. I drew 2 people on a bench, one old, one small, a basket between them, and apples falling from a tree. She clapped like it was the best thing she'd ever seen. Later that night, when the party ended and the guests left, I found the drawing she'd taped to the fridge. Next to it, in shaky letters, she'd written, "Me plus Grandma, happy." I never took it down, even when it yellowed, even when the tape curled, and I still have it framed now hanging behind my bedroom door. Not because it's beautiful, but because in that tiny moment, someone saw me, not as the helper, not as the background, but as someone who made them feel safe. It was late. I couldn't sleep. The wind tapped against my bedroom window like it wanted to say something I wasn't ready to hear. I sat at my desk, the lamp low, the house quiet, and I opened my laptop. Not for work, not for bills, just to look. I opened my email, drafts. There it was, still there after all this time, subject line blank. Just one attachment, a scanned copy of Maddie's preschool birthday card, the one she made for me in crayon with a backwards G in Grandma. I'd saved it years ago, never sent it, never deleted it. Tonight, I clicked on it. I read the one line I'd typed but never sent. "She still calls you Grandma." My hand hovered over the mouse, then moved away. Instead, I clicked reply on a message from earlier this year, from Mom. Unread until now. No subject, just the line. "The bank account has been reassigned. Love always, even if silent." I stared at it, then began typing. Just one line. "Maddie's art contest is next month. She drew a bench with 2 people. No emoji, no sign-off. Just that." I hit send. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was betraying anyone. There's a memory I've carried for years. Not because it hurt, but because I thought it didn't matter. It was the Tuesday after Maddie's first day of school. Her parents were running late again, and I was the one who picked her up. No big deal. We stopped by the market for carrots. She picked the softest ones, saying they smelled like cartoons. We walked home, my knees aching, her backpack bouncing. In the kitchen, I boiled soup while she sat on the floor, drawing with chalk on the old slate board I'd saved from when her mother was little. When I turned around, she held it up proudly, a stick figure with wild hair, and next to it, "Grammar is magic," written backwards, of course. I smiled then, but truthfully, I was tired, worried about bills, alone with a life that had gotten smaller over time. So I wiped the board clean, told her to wash up for dinner, said nothing more. I never told anyone about that day. It felt small, but now that everything has shifted, I realise what I missed. That moment wasn't small. It was a child, seeing something sparkly in me when all I saw was dull. She thought I was magic, even when I couldn't be. That board? It's still in the attic. I climbed up last night and found it, faint, but still there. Beneath the eraser smudges was a ghost of that old chalk line. "Grammar is magic." This time, I didn't wipe it away. The house smelled like cinnamon and overcooked tea. It was quiet, except for the occasional creak of wood beneath slow footsteps. I had just finished setting the small table. Only 2 cups. only one seat taken, and then the door opened. No knock, just the familiar soft shuffle of someone who used to live here. It was my daughter. She looked older, more tired around the eyes, but something gentler too, like she'd put down a weight she'd carried too long. She didn't say anything. She just walked in, saw the table, saw the board, Maddie's chalkboard, now cleaned, except for one corner where her crayon message still lingered faintly. Grammar is magic. My daughter didn't cry, didn't run to hug me, but she sat, and that alone said more than years of letters could have. We sipped tea, in silence, and then she did something I didn't expect. She reached into her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper, no words on the outside. Inside was Maddie's drawing, the one she'd sent to school last week for a contest. A park bench, 2 figures, one small, one with a long braid just like mine, and written in that slanted scrawl only kids can do, "This is me and Grandma. We're still friends even when no one talks." I looked up, and my daughter, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, like I still belonged in the frame. I didn't say, "I forgive you." I didn't need to, because I realised, in that soft moment, I already had. A week after that tea, I came by when no one was home. Just a short visit. I had a book to drop off. Maddie had wanted it last summer. I let myself in. The house smelled like crayons and dryer sheets. Familiar. And then I saw it, on the small hallway wall next to Maddie's room. A new frame had gone up, not large, not centred, just there. Inside was the drawing, 2 stick figures on a bench, one labelled me, one labelled Grandma. I stood there for a while, unsure if I was supposed to see it, but I did. And then I noticed something else. Maddie's chalkboard. It had been cleaned. But this time, someone had written over the faint words with bright white chalk, "Love doesn't need a permission slip." Underneath, in purple, "Grammar is still magic." I didn't cry. I just smiled, ran a finger gently across the board, left the book on the bench by the stairs, and before I left, I opened the kitchen drawer. Tucked inside was the old tea towel I thought they'd thrown away, neatly folded, washed, waiting. They didn't erase me. They just needed time to see I'd never left. People always assume that when someone older walks away, they've simply given up. But we don't walk away because we're weak. We walk because we've learned that sometimes silence carries more weight than begging to be seen. I didn't cancel their college fund out of spite. I cancelled it because I realised something deeper. If I'm no longer part of their future, I don't have to keep financing the version of it that erases me. That money wasn't just dollars. It was memories. Every deposit a birthday missed. Every interest earned. A meal skipped. But what I gave them in that letter, what I left in that old towel, what I allowed to stay on Maddie's board, was something bigger than inheritance. It was proof that real love, doesn't disappear just because it's ignored. And maybe, years from now, Maddie will grow up and find that drawing again. And maybe she'll ask, why was Grandma magic? And I hope someone tells her, because she never left, even when we thought she did. I never asked for thanks. I just didn't want to disappear. And maybe that's the real legacy, being remembered, not for what you gave, but for what you refused to take back, even when they forgot how much it cost you. What would you do if the people you once held closest started treating you like a chapter they'd outgrown? Would you walk away quietly, or would you leave something behind that they could never throw out?